2. It's just to make it absolutely positively clear that that's your high point up there, as opposed to just having to guess, because these are kind of pixely graphs, and so it's hard to tell where they hit. On the homework, on the written work, and on the test, you will assume that if it looks like it has a high point at the nice spot, it does. Or if it looks like it has a low point at that spot, it does. Usually we don't have as much problem with telling where it's crossing the x and y axis. That's not the problem. It's when we have to make those curves that it's icky looking. I am supposed to write an equation for this. Let's start with what would be the easiest one to write. Now it tells me it needs to be sinusoidal. That means it's either going to be a sine or a cosine. Which one would be easier for this one and why?
Cosine.
Why?
Because it doesn't go through 0, 0.
That's right. It doesn't go through 0, 0, so sine is not an easy one. Sine would require a phase shift. Furthermore, it looks kind of cosine-like. If this point were at the top instead of at the bottom, you go, oh, it'd be a nice easy positive cosine, but by making it the bottom, we know it's going to be negative something cosine and then go from there. So we're going to start with the idea that this is going to be a cosine function. So in my cosine functions, remember I have a cosine of bx plus c plus d. What is a for my problem? Well, what is a supposed to be? At least what is it related to? Amplitude. It's related to the amplitude. The absolute value of a will be the amplitude. What's the amplitude of my graph? 2? So 2 is the amplitude? Okay, so will A be 2?
No.
No, because why will it need to be negative? It's not that I have negative amplitude, it needs to be negative because it's reflected over the x-axis. That's how I got my low point here instead of a high point. My standard cosine without the reflection has a high point at the y, where it runs into the y-axis. This one has a low point, so that makes it negative. Okay, what is b related to? Remember my b here? It was related to something related to graphs. Period. So my period, if you remember, is equal to 2 pi divided by b. Well, based on this graph, what is the period? Okay, we got both for 9, 3, and 6. Huh. Well, here's a low point, here's a low point. Can I count between those two? Will that work? Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going for the person who said 6. My period is 6. That's how long it took for me to get from one low point all the way up and back down to the next one. That was not the only place I could have counted, but that was a nice place to count because it was easy to see. I could also have counted high points up there. The thing that probably wouldn't have been helpful was trying to count, because this is in the middle of 2 of my tick marks, so that might not have been overly helpful for counting. So my period is 6, but what I need to be able to write my equation is b, so I need to solve 6 equals 2 pi over b for b. This will give me 6b equals 2 pi, so b equals 2 pi over 6, which can be simplified to pi over 3. So that's going to be my b. C, I decided this was a cosine graph. I've decided that it's reflected over the x-axis. So what can you tell me about the phase shift? There is none. So that means my C is going to be 0 because there is no phase shift. What about D? Remember, D is what?
Vertical.
How up or down it is. So basically, did the midline move, and if so, where? Well, originally the midline would be at the x-axis. Did it go anywhere, or do I have as much graph above the x-axis as I do below? Yeah. So D is 0. So that means my equation that I can put in there that it should be happy with is f of x equals negative 2 cosine of pi over 3, and don't forget the x part. A lot of people, that's the thing that they're forgetting when they put them in. There still has to be a variable, otherwise You don't have a sinusoidal curve, you have a nice straight line.